Hi, in this video we will look at Scrum Events. Scrum uses prescribed events to create a routine and to reduce the need for other events that are not defined in the Scrum framework. At the heart of Scrum is the sprint, which acts as a container for all 4 Scrum events. The sprint starts with a sprint planning meeting, where the work that will be done in the sprint is planned. Every day of the sprint, the development team holds a daily Scrum meeting. At the end of the sprint review is held. This gives an opportunity to review the increment. And finally, the sprint retrospective is an opportunity to improve the process. All events in Scrum have a maximum duration and therefore are time boxed. Other than the sprint itself, each of these 4 events in Scrum is a formal opportunity to inspect and adapt something. All events are designed to enable the maximum transparency and inspection. Therefore, if one of them is omitted, you automatically reduce the transparency in your process and miss the opportunity to inspect and adapt your increment or the process itself. And this in turn might result in a suboptimal output. So let's now look at each of these Scrum events in detail. A sprint has a time box of 1 month or less. In this period of time, the development team has to create a potentially shippable product increment. And as the sprint is at the heart of Scrum, the whole Scrum team takes part in it. If the sprint is too long, the definition of what is being built may change and the product complexity may rise. Similarly, the risk and the uncertainty will increase in a longer sprint. Therefore, it is important that a sprint has a short time horizon. This enables the team to get the customer feedback frequently, and it also makes it easier for them to plan what they're going to be building. A new sprint starts immediately after the previous one has ended. So there are no gaps between sprints and nothing happens in between sprints. Each sprint also has a sprint goal, which is an objective that will be met within the sprint time box. It helps the team to understand why it is building what it is building, and it helps to have a guide throughout the sprint. There are a couple of other rules that the Scrum outlines. First, it is important that during the sprint the quality standards do not decrease, especially if the time box is about to expire. Second, as the product increment is being built, new things are learned. When necessary, the scope of the sprint may be clarified and renegotiated between the development team and the product owner. Third, no changes should be made if they endanger the sprint goal. And finally, a sprint can be cancelled before the sprint time box is over. However, that is rarely practiced as it consumes a lot of resources and is often traumatic to the Scrum team. There is only one person who can cancel a sprint, and that is our product owner. A sprint can be cancelled if the sprint goal becomes obsolete. This might occur if the company decides to change the direction or if there are major changes in the market. If the sprint is cancelled, completed items will be reviewed and incomplete items will be re-estimated and put back into the product backlog. Sprint planning happens at the beginning of each sprint, right after concluding the previous one. The sprint planning lasts maximum 8 hours for a 1-month sprint. For shorter sprints, the event is usually shorter. The goal of this event is to plan the work that will be performed during the sprint. This plan is created collaboratively by the entire Scrum team. The Scrum Master ensures that the event takes place and that everyone understands its purpose. The Scrum Master also teaches the Scrum team to keep it within the time box. During this event, the product owner and the development team agree on the sprint goal and discuss which items from the product backlog will be added to the sprint backlog. Sprint planning answers 2 questions. First, what can be delivered in the increment resulting from the upcoming sprint? And second, how will the work needed to deliver the increment be achieved? So the first step of this meeting is to understand what can be done in the sprint. The product owner discusses the objective that the sprint should achieve and the product items that would help to achieve it. The entire team collaborates on understanding the work of the sprint and crafting a sprint goal. This goal provides guidance to the development team on why it is building the increment. Then the development team works to forecast what can be done in the sprint. In order to make this forecast, the Scrum team needs to take into account a few details, such as the latest product increment, the project capacity of the development team, and the past performance of the development team. Even though the product owner participates in this discussion, the number of product backlog items selected is solely up to the development team. Once a sprint goal has been defined and the product backlog items for the sprint selected, the development team decides how the functionality will be built into a product increment. The selected product items plus the plan for delivering them form the sprint backlog. Work planned for the first days of the sprint is decomposed by the end of this meeting. This meeting cannot identify all the work that needs to be done in advance. It is just a plan with enough details so that the development work can start. In case the estimated work is too much, the team might renegotiate the selected product backlog items with the product owner. When needed, the development team can also invite people outside of the Scrum team to attend and to provide technical or domain advice. By the end of sprint planning, the development team should be able to explain the product owner and the Scrum Master how they plan to accomplish the sprint goal. The daily Scrum is held every day during the sprint, and it is intended for the development team. It lasts 15 minutes and is held at the same time and place each day to reduce complexity. The goal of this meeting is to inspect the progress towards the sprint goal. This meeting is meant for the development team, the product owner, and the Scrum Master do not have to be there. The Scrum Master ensures that the development team has the meeting, but the development team is responsible for conducting it. The structure of the meeting is set by the development team and can be conducted in different ways, as long as it focuses on the progress towards the sprint goal. There is no fixed structure defined in the Scrum Guide. One of the suggestions, however, is to answer 3 questions. What did I do yesterday to reach the sprint goal? What will I do today to reach the sprint goal? And do I see any impediment that prevents me or the development team from meeting the sprint goal? Development team or team members often meet immediately after the daily Scrum for detailed discussions or to adapt or replan the rest of the sprint's work. It is an internal meeting, and if others are present, the Scrum Master has to ensure that they do not disrupt the meeting. A sprint review is held at the end of each sprint. The sprint review lasts maximum 4 hours for a 1-month sprint, and for shorter sprints, the event is usually shorter. The goal of this meeting is to inspect the increment and adapt the product backlog if needed. This is an informal meeting, and the presentation of the increment is intended to elicit feedback and foster collaboration. The result of the sprint review is a revised product backlog. The Scrum Master ensures that the event takes place. Everyone understands its purpose and the time box is kept. The product owner owns this meeting and will invite key stakeholders. The whole Scrum team and stakeholders collaborate on inspecting the increment and discussing the next things that could be done to optimize the value. The sprint review meeting has the following steps. First, the product owner explains which items have been done and what has not been done. The product owner also explains how items contribute in their value. Then, the development team discusses what went well, what problems they had, and how they overcame them. After that, the development team demonstrates the increment. The unfinished items are not demonstrated and go back to product backlog. It is extremely valuable for stakeholders to try out the product so that they can give more appropriate feedback and ask questions. The product owner discusses the product backlog as it stands, and together with the entire group discusses what to do next. Then attendees review how the marketplace or potential use of the product might have changed and what should be done next. Stakeholders can suggest new items for the product backlog in this meeting. They also review the timeline, budget, potential capabilities for Marketplace, and determine the functionality of the next release and its date. The sprint retrospective takes place right after the sprint review and before the next sprint planning. It lasts maximum 3 hours for a 1-month sprint. For shorter sprints, it could be shorter. The goal of this meeting is to inspect and adapt the process. It gives the Scrum team an opportunity to inspect itself and create a plan for improvements to be enacted during the next sprint. It is an internal Scrum team event. Stakeholders and management are not allowed to participate. The Scrum Master acts as a facilitator. This person makes sure that everyone knows the purpose, the time box, and ensures that the meeting is productive and positive. The Scrum Guide does not have a special structure for this event, but it should inspect how the last sprint went with regards to people, relationships, processes, and tools, and identify improvements and create a plan for implementing them. By the end of this meeting, the Scrum team should have at least one process improvement that will be implemented in the next sprint. Not to forget about it, it is included in the sprint backlog directly. During this event, the Scrum team can improve the quality of the product by improving processes or adapting the definition of done.